Hello students, welcome back to this tele and radio tutoring alternative English class with me Esther Zitsobio as your tutor. Today our topic is from the poetry section. The poem that we will be doing today is Death Be Not Proud by Donne. Before we begin, I once again recommend you all to take your alternative English textbook, open it to where your poem is and follow through as we discuss the poem together. About the poet Donne, 22nd January 1572 to 31st March 1631, was an English poet, scholar, soldier, and secretary born into a Catholic family who reluctantly became a cleric in the Church of England. He was the Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. He is considered the preeminent representative of the metaphysical poets. His poetical works are noted for their metaphorical and sensual style and includes sonnets, love poems, religious poems, Latin translations, love poems, elegies, songs, and satires. He is also known for his sermons. Holy Sonnet 10, also known as Death Be Not Proud, is a 14-line poem which is called a sonnet. It is included in one of the 19 sonnets that comprises Donne's Holy Sonnets or Divine Meditations. Among his best-known works, in this sonnet, the speaker directly addresses death and personifies death as a person, arguing that it is powerless because it acts merely as a short sleep between the earthly living and the eternal afterlife. He also emphasizes that man, though fated to die, is more powerful than death itself. Death Be Not Proud by Donne. Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou think'st thou dost overthrow, die not, poor dead, nor yet canst thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure then from thee much more must flow. And soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and soul's delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell. And poppy or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke. Why swellest thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. The first two lines. Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. In the first two lines, the speaker directly addresses and personifies death, saying, Death, don't be proud. Death, don't be so arrogant, just because some people find you mighty and dreadful. Here, the poet claims that death is definitely not mighty nor something to be scared of. Proceeding to the next two lines. For those whom thou think'st thou dost overthrow, die not, poor dead, nor yet canst thou kill me. Here, The poet says death does not kill people because people don't really die. The speaker here is trying to tell us the Christian belief of eternal life after death. And in reference to this, he says that death deliberates their souls and directs them to eternal life. He does not consider death to be a conqueror. Instead, he calls it as a poor fellow, claiming that death can never kill his soul. Proceeding to the next two lines. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures thee, much pleasure from thee much more must flow. Here, the poet is trying to criticize and compare that to rest and sleep, which are like images of death. In fact, he considers death to be giving us much more pleasure and much more relaxations than the pleasure that we get from activities like resting and sleeping. What we need to understand from this line is that the poet is trying to erase the fear that people have for death by comparing it with mere activities like resting and sleeping, which are definitely not dangerous activities. Proceeding to the next two lines. And soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and soul's delivery. In these lines, the poet says that it is often the best people, the best men, who go with death sooner. Why? It is because they want to rest their bones. They want to lay their bodies to rest because they want their souls to be free from the world that is full of problems and worries. Therefore, these good people prefer death so that their souls will be free from the world to be delivered to the afterlife, that is, to the eternal world. Next lines. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell. Here, the poet is trying to belittle death, calling it a slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, saying it can do nothing of its own will. Death is fully controlled by these four things. Fate. Fate controls everything that will happen to someone, including their death. Chance. The idea that anything can happen to someone, perhaps like an accident. Kings. Here refers to the death sentences that kings give or given by the kings, or sending his subjects or soldiers to war, to be killed or to kill. Desperate men refer to people who commit suicide. Therefore, by citing these examples, the poet is trying to say that death does not have any supreme power to kill, but these are the reasons that death happens. Therefore, people shouldn't consider death as powerful. The speaker also points out that death is friends with poison, war, and sickness. Poison, war, and sickness are things never appreciated or loved by human beings, because these things do not give a positive vibe. They all have one thing in common: destruction. Therefore, the poet here is trying to criticize death for being friends with horrible things like poison, war, and sickness, which is hated by everyone. Proceeding to the next two lines. And poppy or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke, why swellest thou then? Poppy here means drugs made with poppy seeds. So earlier, the poet was comparing death to rest and sleep, which gives us pleasure. But here, he is trying to add up his point of criticizing death by claiming that drugs and magical spells are more effective than death. When it comes to relaxation and pleasure, so keeping all this in mind, the poet claims and questions what possible reason could death have to be boasting about or to be swelling with pride. Proceeding to the last two lines of the poem. One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. Death is nothing but a short sleep in between people's earthly lives and the eternal afterlife, after which we wake up to the eternal world, where death no longer exists in the afterlife. The last sentence in the poem, death, thou shalt die, is a metaphorical paradox. When a person dies, only his physical body dies, his soul remains forever. Therefore, death dies with our physical bodies, making our soul eternal. So, death is dead in the eternal world. So with that, we come to the end of the explanation of the poem. Now we will be checking out some poetic devices or literary devices applied in this sonnet. The first thing, let's check the theme of the poem. The theme of the poem is the powerlessness of death. The speaker directly addresses death as a person, seeking to deprive it of its powers and emphasize that man, though fated to die, is more powerful than death itself. The poem paints a picture of death as a prideful and boastful one, and works to deflate its importance by arguing that it is nothing more than a rest or a sleep. He further calls death a poor fellow and a slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men. With death's powerlessness proven by the end of the poem, it is death itself who dies and doesn't exist in the eternal world. So with some of these points in mind, the poet throughout the poem aims to defame and bring down death to nothing. Therefore, the theme of the poem is all about the powerlessness of death. Now, the next poetic device is personification. Personification means to attribute human features to non-human things. Donne has personified death as a person throughout the poem by telling it not to be proud, not to be boastful, and so on. So death is personified here. The next poetic device is metaphor. We have discussed about metaphor in our previous class. The poet uses metaphor in the first line, that is, death be not proud, by comparing death to a proud man. In the ninth line, thou art slave to fate, by comparing death to a slave. The next poetic device used in the poem is alliteration. Alliteration means repetition of the same consonant sounds of a line in a poetry. So alliteration applied in this poem is in lines 3, line 6, and lines 13. In lines 3, for those whom thou thinkst thou dost overthrow. The sound th sound is repeated here. In lines 6, much pleasure then from thee much more must flow. M sound is repeated here. One short sleep past, we wake eternally. Repetition of the S sound. Now coming to the final poetic device that we'll be discussing today is rhyme scheme. The rhyme scheme of this poem is D, A, so, B, overthrow, B, me, A. So the first quatrain, the rhyme scheme of the first quatrain is A, B, B, A. The next quatrain, B, A, flow, B, go, B, delivery, A. So the rhyme scheme for the next quatrain is A, B, B, A. Next line, man, C, dwell, D, well, D, then, C. So the third quatrain, the rhyme scheme for the third quatrain is C, D, D, C. Next line, eternally, E, die, E. So the rhyme scheme for the couplet is E. Therefore, the first quatrain A, B, B, A, second quatrain A, B, B, A, third quatrain C, D, D, C, and the couplet, the last two lines, the rhyme scheme for the last two lines is E, E. So students, with that, we come to the end of our lesson for today. Thank you all so much for your cooperation and patience. We'll get back to you in our next video class. Till then, keep well, stay safe, and stay healthy.